The restaurant smelled like old money and newer lies. I could taste both in the air, something floral and expensive, mixing with the sharp bite of aged whiskey and leather, the kind of place where the silverware probably cost more than my entire month's rent. I shouldn't have been there. My roommate had practically shoved me out the door, insisting that this blind date would be different, that Marcus seemed normal from his profile, that I needed to stop hiding in our cramped apartment like some wounded animal. She was wrong. I knew she was wrong the moment I stepped through those heavy mahogany doors. The hostess looked at me the way people in expensive places always did, a quick scan from my discount store dress to my worn flats, her smile tightening just enough to let me know I didn't belong. I clutched my purse tighter, the fake leather cracking under my fingers. Reservation? Her voice was silk wrapped around steel. I'm meeting someone. Marcus Chen? Table for two? She glanced at her computer screen, manicured nails clicking against the keys. Mr. Chen hasn't arrived yet. I can seat you? Or you'd prefer to wait at the bar? The bar meant standing, meant being even more visible in my cheap dress. I'll sit, thank you. She led me through the dining room, and I felt every eye that turned my way. The carpet was so thick my heels sank into it. Crystal chandeliers threw rainbow prisms across white tablecloths. Everyone here looked like they'd been born knowing which fork to use, which wine to order, how to exist in spaces like this without their hands shaking. Here you are. She gestured to a corner table, partially hidden by a decorative screen of bamboo and frosted glass. I slid into the chair, grateful for the semi-privacy. At least I could hide my nervousness here, could check my phone without feeling like the entire restaurant was watching me wait for a man who might not even show up. 20 minutes crawled by. I'd already read the menu 3 times, memorized the wine list I couldn't afford, and checked my phone so many times the battery dropped to 60%. The waiter had filled my water glass twice, his pity becoming more obvious with each visit. Marcus wasn't coming. Of course he wasn't. This was just like the last time and the time before that. Men took one look at me, tired eyes, clothes from clearance racks, the kind of exhaustion that came from working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. And they found excuses. I was reaching for my purse, ready to slink out before the humiliation became completely unbearable when I saw him. Not Marcus. Definitely not Marcus. A man had entered through a private entrance I hadn't even noticed, flanked by 2 others in dark suits that screamed security. But it wasn't the guards that made my breath catch. It was him. He moved through the restaurant like he owned it, and maybe he did. Tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair swept back from a face that belonged in magazines or movies. Young, maybe early 30s, but carrying himself with the kind of confidence that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with power. His suit probably cost more than my car. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. A watch caught the light on his wrist, and even from across the room, I could tell it was worth more than I'd make in a year. He said something to the hostess, who practically bowed. One of his guards scanned the room with the kind of alertness that made my spine prickle. These weren't just bodyguards, these were men who knew how to hurt people. I looked away quickly, focusing on my water glass. Men like that didn't notice women like me. I was furniture, wallpaper, part of the background noise of their expensive lives. But then I heard footsteps approaching. Heavy, confident, moving toward my little corner. Sorry I'm late. The voice wrapped around me like smoke, deep, accented with something I couldn't quite place. Mediterranean maybe, or Eastern European. It carried the kind of authority that made people straighten their spines without thinking. I looked up. He was standing at my table, not near it. At it. Looking down at me with eyes so dark they were almost black, framed by thick lashes that should have been illegal on a man. This close, I could smell him. Something expensive and masculine. Cedar and citrus and danger. My voice came out as a squeak. I cleared my throat, tried again. I think there's been a mistake. One corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. Something more predatory. Is there? He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down before I could protest. His movements were fluid, economical, like a panther deciding to rest. The 2 guards positioned themselves nearby, one by the decorative screen, one with a clear view of the entrance. Both of them watching everything except us. I'm waiting for someone, I managed, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. A blind date. Marcus Chen. He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease in a way I would never be. And I was supposed to meet someone at table 12. It seems we're both in the wrong place, table 12. I glanced at the small number on our table. 14. Oh, God. The hostess had seated me at the wrong table, and he'd assumed. I should go, I said, starting to rise. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to stay. It wasn't a request. The single word carried enough weight to make me sink back into my chair without thinking. He studied me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight, like he was cataloging every detail, every flaw, every secret I'd ever kept. You're nervous, he observed. I'm embarrassed, I corrected, trying to find some shred of dignity. I'm clearly in your seat, and I've probably ruined your evening, and I should really... What's your name? The question cut through my rambling. I blinked at him. Why? Because I'd like to know the name of the woman sitting at my table. Another almost smile. Unless you prefer I keep calling you the nervous girl in the corner. Heat flooded my cheeks. Emma Richards. Emma. He said it slowly, like he was tasting it. I'm Damien. No last name. Just Damien. Like that was all I needed to know. All I deserved to know. Well, Damien, I really should let you have your table back. My date clearly isn't coming anyway, so your date is an idiot. The words were matter of fact, delivered without inflection, but they hit me somewhere in the chest, made something flutter that I didn't want to examine too closely. You don't know anything about him, I said quietly. I know he left you waiting, alone, in a place like this. His eyes darkened. That tells me everything I need to know. A waiter appeared as if summoned by telepathy. Mr. Volkov, your usual Volkov. The name registered somewhere in the back of my mind, set off alarm bells I couldn't quite identify. Yes, and for the lady. He looked at me expectantly. Oh no, I really can't. You haven't eaten. It wasn't a question. The menu is prefixed tonight. Choose something, Emma. The way he said my name made my stomach flip. Like it was his now. Like I was. I looked at the prices and felt dizzy. $40 for an appetizer, $60 for the main course. I couldn't afford this. I couldn't afford to be here, sitting across from this man who radiated danger and money in equal measure. I'm not hungry, I lied. His eyes narrowed slightly. When was the last time you ate? This morning. Another lie. It had been yesterday afternoon, a granola bar between my shifts at the diner and the late-night cleaning job. He said something in another language to the waiter, rapid and commanding. The waiter nodded and disappeared. I ordered for you, Damien said. You'll eat. You can't just... I can. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and suddenly the space between us felt impossibly small. And I will. You look like you're about to fall over, Emma. When was the last time someone took care of you? The question was so unexpected, so intimate, that I couldn't breathe for a moment. No one had asked me that. Not in years. Not since my mother died and I'd been left alone to figure out how to survive in a world that didn't care if I drowned. That's none of your business, I whispered. Perhaps not. He didn't look away. But you're at my table now. That makes you my concern. Something in his tone made me shiver. Not fear exactly. Something more complicated. Something that felt like standing too close to a fire. Dangerous, but warm. Why? I asked. Why do you care? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Just studied me with those impossibly dark eyes, like he was solving an equation only he could see. Because you're afraid, he said finally, and you're trying very hard not to show it. Because you don't belong here, but you're too proud to run. Because... He paused, something flickering across his face. Because the moment I walked in and saw you sitting here, looking like a frightened dove in a room full of wolves, I knew. Knew what? His smile this time was real, and it was terrifying. That you were mine. The words hung in the air between us, impossible and absolute. Before I could respond, before I could process what he'd just said, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. Excuse me for a moment. He stood, and one of the guards immediately stepped closer. They moved away toward the private entrance, heads bent in urgent conversation. I sat frozen, my hands trembling in my lap. That you were mine. What did that even mean? This was insane. I should leave. Should grab my purse and walk out and never look back. But I didn't move. The waiter returned with wine, something red and probably older than me, and began setting up our courses, scallops that looked like art. Bread that smelled like heaven. Each plate was more beautiful than the last. I shouldn't eat this. Shouldn't accept anything from a man named Volkov, who traveled with armed guards and said things like, "You were mine," with such casual certainty. But God, I was so hungry, and so tired of being hungry. Damien returned a few minutes later, his expression unreadable. He sat down and gestured to the food. "Eat, Emma." I picked up my fork. The scallops melted on my tongue, butter and salt, and something divine. I tried not to moan. He watched me eat with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't, like my pleasure pleased him, like feeding me satisfied something primal in him. "Better?" he asked when I'd finished the appetizer. "Yes," I admitted. "Thank you." "You work 2 jobs. Again, not a question. I froze. "How did you—" "Your hands." He nodded toward them. "Rough from cleaning products, but you also have a name-tagged tan line on your shirt from something you wore earlier today, and the way you looked at the prices—" He shrugged. "You're exhausted, underfed, and probably haven't had a night off in months." I should have been angry at his presumption. Instead, I felt naked, seen. "I do what I have to do," I said quietly. "And your date? Marcus. What does he do?" "I don't know. We'd never actually met before tonight. It was a blind date set up by a friend." Something dark crossed Damien's face. "You agreed to meet a stranger alone in an expensive restaurant. I was supposed to be safe here," I defended. "It's a public place and—" "Public means nothing." His voice dropped. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? How easily someone could—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. "You don't know this, Marcus. Don't know his intentions, his connections, whether he's safe. And you're safe?" The words came out before I could stop them. His smile was razor-sharp. "No, Emma. I'm not safe at all. But at least I'm honest about it." The main course arrived. Lamb so tender it fell off the bone. Vegetables that tasted like they'd been grown in heaven's garden. I tried to eat slowly, tried to maintain some dignity, but it was impossible. Real food, good food. After so long surviving on ramen and hope. "Why are you really here?" I asked between bites. "You obviously weren't expecting to find me at your table." "Business dinner," he said vaguely. "Someone who wanted to discuss partnerships. But he's not coming either." "How do you know?" His smile was cold. "Because 20 minutes ago, he learned what happens to people who waste my time." The temperature in our little corner seemed to drop 10 degrees. I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly vanishing. "What do you do, Damien?" I asked carefully. "For a living?" "I solve problems." He took a sip of wine, watching me over the rim of his glass. "And I collect things." "What kind of things?" "Beautiful things, rare things, things that don't know their own worth." His eyes never left mine, things that need protection. My heart was racing again, but for different reasons now. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to run, to get away from this man who looked at me like I was something to be acquired. But another part of me, a part I didn't recognize and didn't trust, wanted to stay. Wanted to know what it felt like to be protected instead of perpetually afraid. To be valuable to someone, even if that someone was dangerous. "I should go," I said, but I didn't move. "You should," he agreed, "but you won't." "Why not?" He set down his glass and leaned forward again, close enough that I could see gold flecks in those dark eyes. "Because you're curious. Because for the first time in years, you feel something other than tired. Because, you know—" He reached across the table, his fingers brushing my hand. The touch was electric. "That walking away from this table means going back to your life. Working yourself to death for people who don't appreciate you. Being invisible. Being alone. And staying means what?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Staying means letting me take care of you." His thumb traced small circles on my wrist, finding my racing pulse. "Means accepting that you walked into my life tonight, sat at my table and became mine. Means understanding that I don't let go of what's mine, Emma. Ever." "You're insane." But I didn't pull my hand away. "Perhaps." He smiled. "Or perhaps I simply know what I want when I see it. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're strong enough to work yourself to exhaustion but too proud to ask for help. I know you showed up tonight despite being terrified, because you're brave underneath all that fear. I know you deserve better than cheap dates and cheaper men who don't have the decency to show up." His grip on my wrist tightened just slightly. "And I know that if I let you walk out of here tonight, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." The words should have sounded like a line, like manipulation, like every red flag relationship therapists warned about. But the way he said them, with such absolute certainty, such raw possession, made them feel like a promise or a threat. Maybe both. "This is crazy," I breathed. "Yes." He didn't deny it. "But answer me this, Emma. If you leave right now, go back to your apartment, your 2 jobs, your exhaustion, will you regret it? Will you lie awake wondering what would have happened if you'd been brave enough to stay?" "I would. God help me, I would." The waiter appeared with dessert, something chocolate and sinful. Damien released my wrist, but his eyes never left my face. "Eat your dessert," he commanded softly, "and then decide. But know this. If you stay, if you let me take you home tonight, everything changes. Your life as you know it ends, and I won't apologize for that." My hands shook as I picked up the dessert spoon. The chocolate was rich and dark and tasted like temptation, like falling. Like the moment before you jump off a cliff and aren't sure if you'll fly or crash. I was still eating when his phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, frowned, and stood. "I need to handle something," he said. "Sergei will stay with you. Don't leave this table." It wasn't a suggestion. One of the guards, Sergei apparently, moved closer, positioning himself between me and the rest of the restaurant. Damien left through the private entrance again, and I was alone with my chocolate and my churning thoughts, and a man built like a tank who was apparently now my babysitter. 10 minutes passed. 15. I'd finished the dessert and was contemplating my escape route when Damien returned. But something had changed. His expression was harder, colder. There was blood on his knuckles, just a spot, but unmistakable. He sat down and picked up his napkin, wiping his hands clean with casual efficiency. "What happened?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Nothing you need to worry about." He signaled the waiter for the check. "Your Marcus showed up. He had to be discouraged from waiting for you." Ice flooded my veins. "What did you do?" "Send him home with a message about respecting people's time." His smile was pleasant and absolutely terrifying. "He won't be bothering you again. You had no right." I had every right. He leaned forward, and suddenly, he wasn't the charming dinner companion anymore. He was something else entirely, something predatory and possessive, and utterly uncompromising. "You're under my protection now, Emma. That means men who disrespect you answer to me. That means anyone who hurts you, threatens you, or even looks at you wrong, will learn very quickly why people fear my name." "People fear your name?" I repeated weakly. "They should." He stood, extending his hand. "Come, we're leaving." "I haven't agreed to anything. You stayed." His eyes glittered. "You ate my food, drank my wine, sat at my table for over an hour. In my world, that's agreement enough. Now you can walk out with me willingly, or I can carry you. But either way, Emma, you're coming home with me tonight." "This is kidnapping," I whispered. "This is protection." He pulled me to my feet with surprising gentleness. "The world is dangerous, especially for beautiful women who sit at wrong tables and catch the attention of dangerous men. Lucky for you, I'm the most dangerous man in this city, which means nobody else will dare touch you." He was insane. Clearly, completely insane. And I was insane too, because instead of screaming or running or calling for help, I let him guide me toward that private entrance, his hand warm and possessive on the small of my back. The restaurant blurred around us. The other guard fell into step behind us. We moved through a service corridor and out into an underground parking garage where a black SUV waited, engine running. "Mr. Volkov," the driver said, opening the rear door. Damien helped me inside. No, not helped. Placed me, like I was something precious and breakable that needed to be handled with care. He slid in beside me, close enough that our thighs touched. The door closed. The locks clicked with a finality that made my pulse spike. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, as the SUV pulled out into the night. "Somewhere safe." His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers intertwining. "Somewhere no one can hurt you. Somewhere you'll never have to work yourself to death again." "I don't understand what's happening." "I know." He raised my hand to his lips, kissed my knuckles with devastating gentleness. "But you will. And by the time you do, Emma, it will be too late to run. You'll already be mine in every way that matters." The city lights streaked past the tinted windows. I should have been terrified, should have been fighting, screaming, demanding to be let out. but all I felt was a strange, breathless anticipation, like standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into darkness, and realizing that falling might feel like flying. Damien's thumb traced patterns on my palm, each touch sending sparks up my arm. "Sleep if you can," he murmured. "It's a long drive, and tomorrow, your new life begins." I closed my eyes, my head falling against his shoulder before I could stop myself. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, his arm coming around me in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. This was insane. Impossible. Wrong in every way. But as the SUV carried us deeper into the night, toward a future I couldn't imagine and probably shouldn't want, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt wanted, claimed, mine. Even if I didn't fully understand yet what that meant, or what price I'd have to pay for it, I woke to silk sheets and confusion. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. The bed beneath me was too soft, the pillows too plush. The air smelled like expensive fabric softener instead of the mildew that perpetually clung to my apartment. Sunlight filtered through curtains that probably cost more than my security deposit, casting everything in a golden glow that felt unreal. Then it all came rushing back. The restaurant. The wrong table. Damien. I sat up too quickly, my heart hammering. The room around me was massive, bigger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a view of the city I'd never seen before, high enough that we had to be at least 20 floors up. The furniture was modern and minimalist, all clean lines and neutral colors. A door to my left stood slightly ajar, revealing marble and chrome that had to be a bathroom. I was still wearing my cheap dress from last night, now wrinkled and uncomfortable. My shoes sat neatly by the bed, placed there by someone who wasn't me. Panic crawled up my throat. What had I done? I'd gotten into a car with a stranger. No, not a stranger. Something worse. A man whose last name made waiters bow and whose knuckles had been bloodied, and who'd said people feared him like it was a simple fact. I scrambled out of bed, my feet sinking into carpet so thick it felt like walking on clouds. I needed to leave. Needed to get out before. The door opened. A woman entered, middle-aged and elegant in a crisp black uniform. She carried a tray with coffee and what looked like breakfast, her expression professionally neutral. "Good morning, Miss Richards," she said in accented English. "Mr. Volkov asked me to bring you breakfast. He apologizes for not being here when you woke. He had business to attend to." I stared at her. "Who are you?" "I'm Elena, the house manager." She set the tray on a table near the window. "Mr. Volkov has arranged for some clothes to be brought up. They should arrive within the hour. In the meantime, the bathroom is fully stocked with everything you might need." "I need to leave," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to go home." Elena's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Volkov anticipated you might feel that way. He asked me to give you this." She pulled an envelope from her pocket and handed it to me. Inside was a note in bold, masculine handwriting. "Don't run, Emma. We need to talk. I'll be back by noon. Everything you need has been provided. D." And beneath it, my apartment keys. My stomach dropped. "He took my keys?" "For your safety," Elena said carefully. "Your building isn't secure, Mr. Volkov had your locks changed this morning and posted security at your door. Your roommate has been informed that you're safe and will explain the situation when you're ready. This couldn't be happening. This was insane. I'd been here less than 12 hours and he'd already taken over my life, changed my locks, invaded my privacy. He had no right," I whispered. Elena didn't respond to that. Instead, she gestured to the breakfast. "Please eat, Miss Richards. You'll feel better with food in your stomach." She left before I could argue, the door closing with a soft click. I stood in the middle of that enormous room, my hands shaking, trying to process what was happening. He'd kidnapped me. That's what this was. Dressed it up in silk sheets and expensive breakfast, but it was still kidnapping. I should call the police, should scream, should do something other than stand here feeling strangely cared for. The coffee smelled incredible. My stomach growled, reminding me that the chocolate dessert last night was the only real meal I'd had in days. The tray held eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, pastries that looked like they came from a bakery that charged by the vowel. I sat down and ate, because I was too hungry not to. Because maybe on a full stomach I could think clearly, could figure out how to escape this golden cage. The eggs were perfect, The coffee was heaven. Everything tasted like it had been prepared by someone who actually knew what they were doing, unlike the burnt toast and instant coffee that comprised my usual breakfast. I was halfway through a croissant when the door opened again. Not Elena this time. Damien. He looked different in daylight, still devastatingly handsome, but somehow more real. His suit was different from last night. Charcoal gray this time, perfectly tailored. His hair was slightly damp like he'd recently showered. He carried himself with that same predatory grace, but there was something else in his eyes as they found me. Something almost uncertain. "You're eating," he said, and he sounded relieved. "Good." "You changed my locks." I set down the croissant, my appetite vanishing. "You went to my apartment without my permission and changed my locks. I also paid your rent for the next 6 months and settled your credit card debts." He moved further into the room, closing the door behind him. "Your landlord was happy to accept my offer." The room spun. "My debts? How did you even—" "I have resources, Emma, and I use them to protect what's mine." "I'm not yours." The words came out too loud, too desperate. "You can't just decide that and expect me to go along with it, can't I?" He moved closer, each step deliberate. "You're here, aren't you? You ate my food, slept in my bed, accepted my protection. At what point does it stop being kidnapping and start being salvation?" I stood, backing away from him until I hit the window. "This is insane. You're insane. I don't even know you." "Then let me tell you." He stopped a few feet away, giving me space, but not enough. Never enough. "My name is Damien Volkov. I'm 32 years old. I was born in Moscow but raised in a dozen different cities as my father built his empire. I speak 6 languages. I don't believe in God, but I believe in loyalty, in family, in protecting what belongs to me." His eyes burned into mine. "And you belong to me now, Emma. Whether you understand that yet or not, people don't belong to other people," I said, but my voice wavered. "In my world, they do." He pulled out his phone, tapped something, and held it out to me. "Do you know what your Marcus was planning to do last night?" I looked at the screen. It showed text messages, conversations about me, about the restaurant, about how I was an easy target and desperate enough to go along with anything, plans to drug my drink, to take me somewhere private, to... I stopped reading, bile rising in my throat. "He's part of a trafficking ring," Damien said quietly, pocketing his phone. "They target vulnerable women through dating apps, promise romance, and deliver hell. You would have disappeared last night, Emma, and no one would have looked very hard for a broke waitress with no family." The room tilted. I grabbed the window frame for support. "That's why I had your locks changed," he continued. "Why I posted guards. Why I'm not letting you go back to that life. Because now that you've been seen with me, now that I've claimed you, you're a target. My enemies will assume you mean something to me. They'll try to use you, hurt you, take you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "And I will burn this city to the ground before I let that happen. So I'm a prisoner," I whispered. "No. You're protected." He reached out, his hand cupping my cheek with surprising gentleness. "There's a difference. I don't see one." "Then let me show you." His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "Stay here today. Let me prove to you that this isn't a cage, that this is a sanctuary, that I can give you everything you've been denying yourself while you worked yourself to death for scraps. And if I still want to leave," something dark flickered in his eyes, "then we'll discuss it. But give me today, Emma. One day to show you what your life could be." I should have said no. Should have demanded he take me home immediately, locks changed or not. But I looked into those dark eyes and saw something that terrified me more than his threats or his guards or his blood-stained knuckles. I saw certainty, absolute, unwavering certainty that I was his, and that he would never let me go. And God help me. Part of me wanted to surrender to it. "One day," I heard myself say. His smile was devastating. "One day." He kept his distance for the rest of the morning, giving me space to shower and change into the clothes that arrived as promised. Designer labels I'd only seen in magazines. Everything in my exact size. I didn't want to think about how he knew my measurements. The bathroom was a dream. Heated marble floors, a shower with 6 different settings, products that smelled like luxury. I stood under the hot water until my skin was pink, trying to wash away the confusion and fear and strange, dangerous want that kept creeping in. When I emerged, wrapped in a towel that was softer than any clothing I owned, Elena was waiting with more options. Casual clothes, business wear, evening gowns, everything I could possibly need. Mr. Volkov wasn't sure of your style, she said apologetically. He erred on the side of variety. I chose jeans and a simple sweater. The most normal things I could find, though even these probably cost more than a week's wages. They fit perfectly, of course. Everything in this place was perfect, polished, designed to trap me in comfort. Damien found me in what he called the library, an entire room lined with books, leather chairs positioned by windows that showed that impossible view. I'd been staring at a first edition of something I'd only ever read in paperback, my fingers trembling at the thought of touching something so valuable. You like to read, he said from the doorway, not a question. He'd probably already researched every detail of my life. When I have time, I said carefully, which isn't often. You'll have time now. He moved into the room and I noticed he'd changed too. Dark jeans, a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Less formal, but somehow more dangerous, like seeing the predator without its civilized veneer. Take whatever you want. All of this is yours now. Nothing here is mine, I corrected. I'm just visiting. Are you? He picked up a book, turning it over in his hands. Hands that had been bloodied last night, protecting me from a threat I hadn't known existed. Tell me, Emma, when was the last time you read a book just for pleasure? When did you last sleep past dawn because you could, not because you were too exhausted to wake up? When did you last eat a meal that didn't come from a microwave or a vending machine? I didn't answer. Couldn't. This isn't visiting, he said softly. This is living. What you were doing before, that was surviving. Barely. I was managing, I said defensively. You were dying. He set down the book and crossed to me, his presence overwhelming in the quiet room. Slowly, painfully, working yourself into an early grave. And for what? An apartment you can barely afford? A life where no one sees you, no one values you, no one cares if you disappear? That's not... It's exactly true. His hand caught my chin, forcing me to look at him. I saw it last night, Emma, the way you flinched when the hostess looked at you. The way you tried to make yourself small, invisible, like you didn't deserve to take up space in that restaurant. The way you were surprised when I wanted you to stay. Tears burned behind my eyes. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, and maybe it was the gentleness in his voice, or the exhaustion finally catching up with me, or the fact that no one had asked me to explain anything in so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to be heard. But the words came tumbling out. I told him about my mother's death 3 years ago, about the medical bills that had buried me in debt, about losing my scholarship when I had to drop out of college to work, about the jobs that paid minimum wage and treated me like I was replaceable, because I was, about the men who'd promised romance and delivered disappointment, about the crushing, suffocating weight of being invisible in a world that only saw you if you had money or beauty or power. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finally ran out of words, he pulled me against his chest in a gesture that should have felt presumptuous, but somehow felt like coming home. No one will make you feel invisible again, he murmured against my hair. Not while I'm alive. I should have pulled away, should have maintained distance, boundaries, self-preservation. Instead, I let myself lean into him, just for a moment. Let myself feel what it was like to be held by someone who seemed genuinely upset on my behalf. Why me? I asked into his shirt. Why do you care? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. My mother was like you once, young, vulnerable, alone in a world that wanted to devour her. My father found her, claimed her, protected her. She fought him at first too, thought he was crazy, dangerous, wrong. Was he? Yes. I felt him smile against my hair, but he loved her with everything he had. Gave her a life of safety and luxury and power, and she gave him loyalty, family, a reason to be more than just a monster. What happened to her? She died when I was 15, cancer. His arms tightened around me. My father survived her by 6 months. Couldn't live without her. Some people say he let himself be killed because existing without her was worse than death. I pulled back to look at him. That's intense. That's love. His eyes were fierce. In my world, in my family, When we choose someone, it's absolute. Forever. No half measures. No walking away. My father taught me that the right woman is worth burning the world for, worth dying for, worth killing for. And you think I'm that woman? I asked, my voice barely audible. I know you are. He cupped my face in both hands. From the moment I saw you in that restaurant, looking lost and brave and so damn beautiful it hurt to breathe, I knew. You were meant to sit at my table, Emma. Meant to walk into my life and change everything. That's not how it works, I protested weakly. People don't just belong together because they sat at the wrong table, don't they? He leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing mine. You felt it too. That pull, that recognition. Like something in you knew something in me. And vice versa, I had felt it. Still felt it. This magnetic, terrifying connection that made no sense and defied all logic. This is too fast, I whispered. I know. He didn't move away. But time doesn't matter when you're certain. And I am certain, Emma. About you, about us. About the fact that letting you walk away would be the biggest mistake of my life. What if I'm not certain? Then I'll wait. His thumb traced my lower lip, and I shivered. I'll wait, and I'll prove myself. And I'll show you every day that you made the right choice by staying. But I won't let you go. I won't let you return to a life that was killing you. I won't risk losing you to men like Marcus, or poverty, or despair. That's not your decision to make, isn't it? His smile was sharp. I made it the moment I sat down at your table and decided you were mine. The only decision you have to make now is whether you fight it or accept it. Those aren't real choices. No, he agreed, but they're the only ones I'm offering. He kissed me then, and it wasn't gentle. It was possession and promise and claim all at once. His mouth was demanding, taking what he wanted, showing me exactly what he'd meant about not doing anything halfway. I should have pushed him away, should have slapped him, screamed, maintained my dignity and independence. Instead, I kissed him back. My hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as my mind screamed warnings. He tasted like coffee and danger, and something darker I couldn't name. His hands slid into my hair, angling my head for deeper access, and I let him. Let him consume me, claim me, mark me as his in the most primal way possible. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. Say you'll stay, he commanded, his voice rough. Say you'll give this a chance. I'll stay, I heard myself whisper. For now. His smile was triumphant and terrifying. For now is enough. For now becomes forever, Emma. You'll see. And looking into his dark, certain eyes, I was afraid he might be right. The rest of the day passed in a blur of luxury and subtle captivity. Damien gave me a tour of the penthouse. Yes, penthouse, because of course he lived at the top of a building that probably had its own zip code. There was a gym, a pool, a theater room, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. I don't cook, he said, when I stared at the marble and chrome, but the staff does. Tell Elena what you want, and it's yours. I used to cook, I said quietly. Before everything. My mom and I would make dinner together every Sunday. Something softened in his expression. Then cook here, whenever you want. The kitchen is yours. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. Like he was giving me permission to make this place home, even though home was supposed to be chosen, not assigned. He had meetings in the afternoon, disappeared into an office I wasn't invited to enter, guards posted outside like sentries. I spent the time exploring, trying to understand the gilded cage I'd agreed to stay in. Every room was perfect. Every detail was expensive. It should have felt cold, sterile, but somehow it didn't. There were personal touches, photographs of what had to be his family, books in multiple languages, artwork that looked original and priceless. I found a balcony and stood in the cold December air, looking out at the city spread below like a carpet of lights and lives. Somewhere down there was my apartment, my old life, the person I'd been 24 hours ago. She felt very far away now. You'll catch cold. I turned. Damien stood in the doorway, holding a cashmere blanket. He'd loosened his tie, and there was a tiredness around his eyes that made him look almost human. I'm fine, I said. He came outside anyway, wrapping the blanket around my shoulders. His hands lingered on my arms, and I felt the heat of him even through the fabric. What are you thinking about? He asked. How much my life has changed in one day. Regrets? I considered lying, then decided he'd see through it anyway. I don't know yet. Honest. He sounded approving. Good. I don't want lies between us, Emma. Whatever else this is, it should be honest. Then honestly, I'm terrified. Of me? Of this. Of how fast it's moving, of how much control you have and how little I have. I turned to face him. Of how much I don't hate it. His eyes darkened. You should hate it. You should be fighting tooth and nail to escape. The fact that you're not, he cupped my cheek. That tells me everything I need to know. What does it tell you? That you need this as much as I need you. That somewhere deep down, you're tired of fighting alone. That you want someone to take care of you, protect you, make decisions so you don't have to carry everything yourself. He was right. And I hated that he was right. That doesn't make this okay, I said. No. But it makes it real. He leaned his forehead against mine. Stay, Emma. Not just for today. Stay and let me show you what life can be when you stop surviving and start living. And if I can't adapt to your world, if I can't handle whatever it is you do, whoever you really are, then we'll figure it out together. His hand slid down to my waist, pulling me closer. But you're stronger than you think. You survived 3 years of hell alone. You can survive anything. Night fell while we stood there, wrapped in cashmere and tension, and the strange, fragile thing growing between us. The city lights came on, thousands of tiny fires fighting against the darkness. Come inside, Damien said eventually. Dinner's ready. We ate in a dining room that could have seated 20, just the two of us at one end of an enormous table. The food was incredible, some kind of pasta that melted on my tongue, wine that probably cost more than my car. Tell me about your work, I said, because I needed to understand what I'd walked into. What do you want to know? The truth. Not whatever sanitized version you think I can handle. He studied me for a long moment, then set down his fork. I run a business empire. Import-export, real estate, investments. Much of it is legitimate. Some of it isn't. I have enemies who would kill me given the chance. I have allies who fear me enough to stay loyal. I make decisions that affect thousands of lives, and not all of those decisions are kind. Are you a criminal? By whose definition? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I break laws that I consider unjust. I hurt people who threaten my family or my interests. I take what I want and protect what's mine with everything I have. Does that make me a criminal? Perhaps. Does it make me a monster? That depends on your perspective. And what's your perspective? I'm a man who does what's necessary to survive in a world that would destroy anyone weak enough to follow all the rules. He reached across the table, taking my hand. But I'm also a man who would never hurt you, Emma. Never betray you. Never let anyone else hurt you. Whatever darkness is in me, it will never touch you. I swear it. I wanted to believe him. God. I wanted to believe him so badly. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now you finish your dinner. Then we watch something mindless on that ridiculously expensive television. Then you sleep in a real bed, safe and protected. And tomorrow we start figuring out what your new life looks like. That simple? That simple. He squeezed my hand. One day at a time, Emma. That's all I'm asking. We finished dinner in comfortable silence. He was right. We did watch something mindless, some action movie that was all explosions and impossible stunts. I fell asleep on the couch, my head on his shoulder, his arm warm and solid around me. When I woke briefly as he carried me to bed, a different room this time, smaller, more personal, I didn't protest. Sleep, he murmured, tucking blankets around me like I was something precious. I've got you. And despite everything, despite the insanity and the danger and the absolute wrongness of this situation, I felt safe. For the first time in years, I felt safe. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for my old life to become a distant memory, like a dream I'd once had about being someone else. I woke each morning in silk sheets that no longer felt foreign. I drank coffee that Elena brought with a smile that had become genuine instead of professional. I wore clothes that fit perfectly, because Damien had an eye for detail that bordered on obsessive. And every evening, I waited for him to come home from whatever dangerous business occupied his days. My heart doing something complicated in my chest when I heard his key in the lock. It was terrifying how quickly I'd adapted, how easily I'd slipped into this life of luxury and protection and carefully managed captivity, because that's what it still was, even if the bars were invisible. I wasn't allowed to leave the building without guards. My phone had been replaced with a new one. More secure, Damien had said, which I suspected meant he could track my every movement. My old friends had been quietly discouraged from contact. My roommate had moved out, the apartment I'd barely been able to afford now sitting empty because Damien owned the building and refused to rent it to anyone else. "It's yours if you want to go back," he'd said when I'd discovered this particular piece of information. "But I'd prefer you stayed here, with me." Prefer. As if I had a real choice. As if his preferences weren't commands wrapped in velvet. But the strangest part? I was happy. Not in the way I'd imagined happiness before. Not the simple contentment of a life lived on my own terms. This was something darker, more complicated. Happiness laced with fear and desire, and the constant awareness that I was playing a dangerous game with a dangerous man. I was standing in the kitchen on a Wednesday afternoon, actually attempting to bake cookies from a recipe my mother used to make, when everything changed. The guards at the elevator had been replaced. I'd noticed it when I'd gone to retrieve a package Elena had accepted earlier. Different faces, harder expressions, the kind of tension that made my spine prickle with instinctive warning. Something was wrong. I was pulling the cookies from the oven when Damien came home early. He never came home early. His schedule was rigid, controlled. Every hour accounted for with meetings and calls and whatever shadowy business kept the city afraid of his name. But here he was at 3 p.m, his expression thunderous, blood on his shirt cuff that he hadn't bothered to hide. "Pack a bag," he said without preamble. "We're leaving." My hands froze on the oven mitts. "What? Why?" "Because I said so." His voice was hard. The gentleness I'd grown accustomed to completely absent. "Now, Emma." "We don't have time for questions." Fear spiked through me. "Damien, what happened?" He crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands gripping my shoulders almost painfully. "Someone made a move against me. A stupid, desperate move, but dangerous nonetheless. This building is secure, but I'm not taking chances with your safety. We're going to one of my properties outside the city until I can handle the situation. Handle it." I looked at the blood on his cuff. "You mean kill someone?" His jaw clenched. "I mean protect what's mine. Now stop asking questions and do as I say." The command in his voice should have made me angry, should have triggered all my instincts to rebel, to assert my independence, to remind him I wasn't property to be moved around at will. Instead, I pulled off the oven mitts and headed for the bedroom because I'd learned something in these 3 weeks. When Damien used that tone, when his eyes went flat and cold, and his accent thickened with stress, people were in danger, and arguing with him wouldn't keep me safe. It would just distract him from doing whatever ruthless thing he needed to do to keep us both alive. I threw clothes into a bag with shaking hands. Practical things. Jeans, sweaters, comfortable shoes. Elena appeared in the doorway, her usually composed face tight with worry. "Miss Richards, I've packed toiletries and medications," she said, handing me a smaller bag. "Mr. Volkov wants you ready in 10 minutes. "What's happening, Elena?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "The Kozlov family. They've been challenging Mr. Volkov's territory for months. Today She swallowed. "They attempted to bomb one of his warehouses. Workers were inside. Good people." My stomach lurched. "Were they—" "Mr. Volkov got them out in time. All except one." Her eyes filled with tears, she blinked away. "Mikhail. He was young. Had a wife, a baby daughter." The cookies I'd been so pleased with suddenly felt obscene. People were dying while I played house in a gilded penthouse, pretending this life was normal. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "It's not your fault." Elena's hand briefly touched my shoulder. "But it's why you must go. The Kozlovs know about you now, know that you matter to him. They'll come for you if they get the chance." I'd known this intellectually. Damien had warned me from the beginning that being his made me a target. But hearing it now, understanding that people had died today, and I could be next, it made everything horrifyingly real. Damien appeared in the doorway, changed into black tactical gear that made him look like exactly what he was, a man prepared for violence. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He took my bag, his free hand finding mine. "Stay close to me. Do exactly what I say when I say it." "Understood?" "Yes." We moved through the penthouse like we were already under siege. More guards than usual lined the hallways, all armed with weapons they didn't bother to conceal. The elevator was operated by someone I didn't recognize, and we descended not to the lobby, but to an underground garage I hadn't known existed. 3 identical black SUVs waited. Engines running, security teams flanking each one. Which one? I asked. All of them. Damien guided me to the middle vehicle. Decoys. Standard protocol when there's a credible threat. Inside the SUV, he positioned me in the center seat, his body between me and the window. 2 guards sat in front, another vehicle ahead of us, one behind. We pulled out in formation, moving fast through streets I barely recognized. Where are we going? I asked quietly. A house in the mountains, 2 hours from here, completely off the grid. No one knows about it except my most trusted people. His arm was around me, holding me against him in a grip that was almost crushing. You'll be safe there. And you? His expression was grim. I'll stay with you tonight. Make sure you're secure. Then I have to go back and end this. End this, I repeated. You mean start a war? No. I mean finish one that someone else started. His hand cupped my face, forcing me to look at him. The Kozlovs killed one of my men today, Emma. A good man with a family who depended on him. They did it to send a message, to show they're not afraid of me, and now I have to send a message back. One that ensures no one ever makes that mistake again. How many people will die? As many as necessary. No hesitation. No remorse. This is my world, Emma. This is what I meant when I said I'd do what's necessary to survive. The Kozlovs drew first blood. Now I finish it, or I look weak. And weakness in my world is death. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him there had to be another way. That violence only bred more violence. That surely there was a solution that didn't involve killing. But I looked into his eyes and saw something that made the words die in my throat. He was afraid. Not for himself. For me. Every ruthless decision, every brutal plan, it all came back to keeping me safe. I'd become the thing he protected above all else. Even above his own humanity. I'm sorry, I said, not sure what I was apologizing for. For being a weakness he couldn't afford. For making him care enough to risk everything. For not running when I should have. Don't be. He kissed my forehead, and his lips lingered there like a benediction. You're the only good thing in my life, Emma. The only pure thing I haven't destroyed. I'd burn the entire world to ash before I let anyone hurt you. The words should have sounded romantic. Instead, they sounded like a threat. Not to me, but to everyone else who might dare to come between us. We drove in tense silence for 2 hours, winding through roads that became increasingly isolated. The city lights faded behind us, replaced by darkness and trees and the oppressive weight of wilderness. When we finally stopped, it was in front of a structure that looked more like a fortress than a house. Stone walls, minimal windows, security cameras at every angle. The other 2 vehicles had split off at some point, taking different routes to confuse anyone who might be following. Inside, the house was surprisingly warm, modern amenities hidden behind rustic decor, a massive fireplace already lit, casting everything in flickering shadows. Damien did a sweep of every room before he let me settle. Guards were posted at every entrance, security systems armed, escape routes planned. You'll stay here until I tell you it's safe to return, he said, pulling weapons from hidden compartments I hadn't known existed. Guns, knives, communication equipment. Anton and his team will protect you. They're the best I have. When will you be back? 2 days, maybe 3. He was checking his weapons with practiced efficiency, his movements sharp and controlled. The Kozlovs have a compound outside the city. I'll hit them there, cut the head off the snake before they can regroup. You're going to kill them. Not a question. Yes. He didn't look up from the gun he was loading. All of them who participated in today's attack. I'll leave the young ones, the ones who weren't involved. But the leaders, the soldiers who planted that bomb, they're already dead. They just don't know it yet. I should have been horrified, should have begged him not to go, to find another way, to be better than this cycle of violence. Instead, I said, "Come back to me." He froze. Then he set down the gun and crossed to me in 2 strides, his hands framing my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about this moment. Always, he promised. No matter what happens, no matter what I have to do, I will always come back to you. He kissed me then, and it tasted like goodbye and desperation, and something that might have been love if we'd met in a different world. under different circumstances. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something I couldn't name. "I need you to understand something," he said quietly. "What I'm about to do, it's brutal, merciless, the kind of thing that will make the news, make people afraid, make my enemies think twice before they ever threaten what's mine again. And when I come back to you, I'll have blood on my hands that won't wash off. I'll be the monster people whisper about in dark corners." "I know," I whispered. "And you're still going to be here when I get back?" He sounded almost vulnerable. "You're not going to look at me differently, see me as the killer I am?" I thought about lying, about saying the right thing, the thing he wanted to hear, but he'd asked for honesty between us, so I gave him truth. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know how I'll feel when you come back covered in blood and death. I don't know if I can live with loving a man who solves problems with violence. But I know," I took a shaky breath, "I know that I'll be here, because walking away from you scares me more than staying, because I've already fallen too far to climb back out. Because you're right. I am yours. Even if I don't fully understand what that means yet." His expression shifted through a dozen emotions. Relief, possession, something that looked almost like pain. "You said love," he murmured. Had I? The word had slipped out without permission, without thought. But now that it was between us, I couldn't take it back. "I did," I said quietly. "Say it again." "I love you." The words felt both true and impossible. I shouldn't. It's too fast, too complicated, too dangerous, but I do. "I love you, Damian Volkov, even though loving you might destroy me." He kissed me again, harder this time, claiming and possessive and desperate. His hands were in my hair, on my waist, everywhere at once, like he was trying to memorize the feel of me before he left. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you too," he said roughly. "More than I've ever loved anything. More than power or money or survival. You've become my reason, Emma, the thing I fight for, the thing I die for, the only thing that makes this brutal, bloody life worth living." We stood there in the firelight, holding each other like the world was ending. And maybe it was. For him, for the Kozlovs, for everyone caught in the crossfire of his revenge. But in that moment, we were safe. Together. Loved. Even if that love was as dangerous as it was real. Damian left an hour later, armed and armored and terrifying in his cold focus. I watched from the window as his SUV disappeared down the dark mountain road, taking him toward violence I didn't want to imagine. The house felt enormous without him. Anton and his team were professional ghosts, present but invisible, giving me space while never letting me truly be alone. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Tried to read, but the words blurred. Tried to do anything except think about what Damian was doing, who he was hurting, how much blood would stain his hands before this was over. The first news report came at dawn. I was in the kitchen, pretending to eat breakfast, when Anton's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression carefully neutral, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated, then turned his phone so I could see. "Massacre at Kozlov compound," the headline screamed. "Entire crime family wiped out in coordinated attack. Police investigating links to rival organizations." There were photos, blurred and taken from a distance but clear enough. Bodies, fire, destruction, the kind of violence that would dominate news cycles for weeks. And somewhere in that chaos was Damian, doing exactly what he'd promised. My hands shook as I set down my coffee cup. This was real. Not some abstract concept of danger, but actual death and destruction carried out by the man I'd just told I loved. "Is he—" I couldn't finish the question. "Safe," Anton said quietly. "I received confirmation 20 minutes ago. Mr. Volkov and his team are en route to a secondary location. He wanted you to know he's unharmed." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by guilt. Damian was safe, but how many others weren't? How many families were waking up to the news that someone they loved had died in the night? The rational part of me knew they weren't innocent, knew they'd participated in violence themselves, had killed Mikhail and who knows how many others. The Kozlovs had chosen this life, accepted these risks. But the part of me that was still Emma Richards, former college student and waitress who'd believed in good and evil as distinct concepts, that part of me was horrified. I spent the day in a fog, moving through the house like a ghost, The news kept updating. Body counts, speculation, interviews with experts who knew nothing about the real world Damien inhabited. By evening, the death toll was up to 15. 15 people. Gone. Because they'd threatened me. I was in the library, staring at a book I wasn't reading, when I heard vehicles approaching. My heart leapt, then stuttered when I realized it wasn't just one vehicle. It was multiple, moving fast, tires screaming on the gravel drive. Anton appeared in the doorway, gun drawn, his face grim. "Miss Richards, we need to move you to the safe room, now." "What's happening?" The Kozlovs had a contingency plan. He was already pulling me toward a wall that I suddenly realized wasn't a wall at all, but a hidden door. A second team we didn't know about, they're here. Terror shot through me, but Damien said, I know what he said, but we missed something, and now they're at the gate. He shoved me through the doorway into a small reinforced room. "Stay here. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe, no matter what you hear." Anton. But he was already gone, the door sealing behind him with a hydraulic hiss. I was alone in the darkness, listening to muffled shouts and the unmistakable sound of gunfire. They were here. The enemy. The people who wanted to hurt me, to hurt Damien. And I was trapped in a concrete box, completely helpless, while men fought and died outside. The gunfire intensified. Something exploded, close enough to shake the walls. I pressed myself into the corner, my hands over my ears, trying to block out the sounds of violence. How long did it last? Minutes? Hours? Time became meaningless in the dark. Finally, silence. Terrible, absolute silence. I waited, my breath coming in panicked gasps, not knowing if the silence meant safety or death. Then the door opened. I screamed, scrambling backward until I saw who stood there. Damien. He was covered in blood, his clothes, his face, his hands. His eyes were wild, feral, the eyes of a man who'd just killed and would kill again without hesitation. "Emma." My name was a ragged sound. "Emma, are you hurt?" "No." I couldn't finish. Couldn't process the sight of him like this. So clearly the monster he'd warned me about. He pulled me from the safe room, checking me for injuries with shaking hands. I got here as fast as I could when Anton called, said they'd found this location. His voice broke. "I thought I'd lost you. I'm fine." "I'm okay." I tried to sound convincing, tried to be brave, but then I looked past him and saw the carnage in the main room. Bodies. So many bodies. Anton was there too, wounded but alive, being tended to by another guard. This was my fault. All of this death and violence and destruction. It all came back to me. To Damien's obsession with protecting what he'd claimed as his. "How many?" I asked numbly. "Emma, don't... How many people died tonight? Here, at the compound? Because of me?" His jaw clenched. 23 total. 8 here. 15 at the Kozlov compound, plus their leader, who I saved for last. His eyes were hard. I made him watch his empire burn before I ended him. Made sure he understood exactly why he was dying. Because he dared to threaten you. I should have collapsed. Should have sobbed or screamed or broken down completely. Instead, I felt something inside me shift, harden. Become something new. I'd chosen this. Chosen him. And that meant accepting all of it. The violence, the blood, the brutal reality of loving a man who solved problems with death. "Take me home," I said quietly. "Take me back to the city." "Emma," I said, "take me home, Damien." I met his eyes. "You were right. I am yours. And if that means living with this, with what you do and who you are, then that's what I'll do. But I can't do it here, in this house where people just died protecting me. Take me home." Something in his expression cracked. Relief and gratitude and love so intense it was almost frightening. "Okay," he said hoarsely. "Okay, we'll go home." He wrapped a coat around me. Mine was inside, unreachable past the bodies, and led me to his SUV. The drive back was silent, his hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. But I didn't pull away, because I'd made my choice, and there was no going back now. The penthouse felt different when we returned. Not physically. Everything was exactly as we'd left it, pristine and untouched. But something had shifted in the air, in the space between Damien and me, in the very foundation of whatever this relationship had become. I'd seen the truth now. Not the sanitized version he tried to protect me from, but the raw, brutal reality of his world. Blood and death and the kind of violence that made headlines. And I'd chosen to come back anyway. That choice changed everything. Damien was quieter in the days that followed. Watchful. Like he was waiting for me to break, to finally realize what I'd gotten myself into and run screaming. His guards were everywhere now, visible, armed, constantly alert. The building had become a fortress, and I was the treasure they were all protecting. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt necessary, because the nightmares had started. Every night, I woke gasping, the sound of gunfire echoing in my ears, the image of bodies burned into my mind. And every night, Damien was there, pulling me against his chest, murmuring in Russian until the terror subsided enough for me to breathe. "I'm sorry," he said one night, his voice rough in the darkness. "I'm so fucking sorry, Emma. You shouldn't have seen that. Shouldn't have been anywhere near it. But I was." I whispered against his shoulder, "and I can't unsee it. I know." His arms tightened around me. If I could take it back, shield you from all of it, I would. But I can't. This is who I am. This is my world. And now it's yours too. I chose it, I reminded him. Reminded myself. Did you? Or did I take away all your other options until choosing me was the only thing left? I pulled back to look at him. Even in the darkness, I could see the self-loathing in his eyes, the guilt that ate at him despite all his talk of necessity and survival. "You gave me a choice that night in the restaurant," I said quietly. "Stay or go." I stayed. Everything that came after, yes. You were controlling and possessive, and you made decisions for me. But I could have fought harder, could have demanded you let me go, could have called the police, my friends, anyone. I cupped his face. I didn't. Because some part of me wanted this. Wanted you. Wanted to be claimed and protected and loved by someone who would burn the world for me. That's not healthy, Emma. No, it's not. I kissed him softly. But it's honest. And you said you wanted honesty between us. He crushed me against him then, his face buried in my hair, his breathing ragged. "I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you have me anyway." We made love that night with a desperation we hadn't felt before, like we were both trying to prove something. That we were alive, that we'd survived, that what we had was worth the blood price we'd paid for it. His hands were gentle despite the violence they'd committed. His kisses were reverent despite the death on his conscience. And when he whispered my name like a prayer, I answered with his like an absolution. Afterward, lying tangled in silk sheets, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my spine, he said, "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened. Nothing good ever followed those words. Okay. The Kozlovs weren't the only threat. They were just the most immediate. He sat up, pulling me with him, so we were facing each other in the darkness. My world has layers, Emma. Enemies I've made over years of building my empire. Rivals who see any weakness as an opportunity. And you. He touched my face. You're both my greatest strength and my greatest weakness now. So, what are you saying? I'm saying that what happened at the mountain house won't be the last time someone tries to use you against me. I'm saying that this life, our life, will always have this element of danger, always. His eyes were intense, and I need to know if you can live with that. Really live with it. Not just survive it, but accept it as the price of being with me. I thought about lying. About saying yes immediately, about being brave and strong and everything he needed me to be. But honesty. We'd promised honesty. I don't know, I admitted. 3 weeks ago, I was a waitress worried about rent and student loans. Now I'm... what? A mob boss's girlfriend? His prisoner? His obsession? I laughed, but it came out bitter. I don't even know what to call myself in your world. You're mine, he said simply. That's all that matters. Not the labels, not the definitions, just that you belong to me and I belong to you. And if that's not enough, if I wake up one day and realize I can't do this anymore, his expression went cold, then we'll have a problem. A problem. I studied him. Would you let me go? The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. No, he finally said. I wouldn't. I can't. You're too deep in my world now, Emma. You know too much. You've seen too much, and more than that. His hand slid to the back of my neck, possessive and gentle at once. I love you too much to let you walk away. Even if you hate me for it. I should have been terrified, should have recognized this for the toxic, dangerous obsession it was. Instead, I felt something settle in my chest. A strange kind of peace. Because at least it was honest. At least he wasn't pretending this was a fairy tale where I could leave whenever I wanted. He was showing me exactly what this was. A beautiful, brutal cage that I'd walked into willingly and would never walk out of. Then I guess I better learn to live with it, I said quietly. His relief was palpable. I'll make it worth it. I swear to you, Emma. I'll give you everything you could ever want. Everything except freedom, and if all I want is you, then you already have everything. He kissed me again, sealing the twisted bargain we'd just made. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my old self screaming warnings I chose to ignore. Life settled into a new rhythm after that night. Damien took steps to integrate me into his world properly, not just as the woman who lived in his penthouse, but as someone who belonged there, someone who mattered. First came the meetings with his inner circle. Men who'd known him for years, who'd fought beside him, who controlled various pieces of his empire. They looked at me with undisguised curiosity at first, trying to figure out what made me special. What hold I had over a man who'd never shown interest in a serious relationship before. Victor was the first to warm up to me. Damien's second in command, a bear of a man with scars on his face, and surprising gentleness in his eyes when he spoke about his own wife and children. "You're good for him," he told me one afternoon when Damien was handling a crisis in another room. "I've known him 15 years, and I've never seen him care about anything beyond power and revenge. But you've made him human again. I'm not sure that's a good thing," I said. In this world, it's everything." He leaned forward, his expression serious. A man with nothing to lose is dangerous. But a man with something to protect? He's unstoppable. You've given Damien a reason to build instead of just destroy. Don't underestimate the power of that. Then came the questions about my past, my family, my education. Damien wanted to know everything, and not just for security reasons. He seemed genuinely interested in the person I'd been before him, the dreams I'd abandoned when my mother died. "You wanted to be a teacher," he said one evening, reading through files his people had compiled on me. "Elementary education. That was a long time ago," I said, uncomfortable with how thoroughly he'd researched me. "Before I had to drop out. Why can't you go back?" I laughed. "Because I have no money, no way to pay for school, and no time even if I did. You have me." He set down the file. "You have access to more money than you could spend in a lifetime. You have time because you don't need to work. You have everything you need to finish your degree, Emma, if you want to." The offer caught me off guard. "You'd let me go to school? Let you?" He raised an eyebrow. "I'm encouraging you. You're too smart to spend your days doing nothing. And having a purpose, something that's yours, will make this life easier to bear." It was a surprisingly thoughtful gesture from a man who'd kidnapped me and refused to let me leave, but that was Damien. A constant contradiction of brutality and tenderness, control and care. I enrolled in online classes the following week. Nothing that required me to physically attend a campus. Damien's paranoia wouldn't allow that, but enough to feel like I was reclaiming some piece of my old dreams. The studying gave me something to focus on besides the violence that occasionally erupted around us. Because it did erupt. Damien's world was never truly peaceful. There were nights when he came home covered in blood that wasn't his, mornings when I'd overhear phone conversations about shipments and territories and people who'd been handled, afternoons when strange men would visit the penthouse, and I'd be asked to stay in the bedroom until they left. But there were also quiet moments. Sunday mornings when he'd make me breakfast, badly, but with such concentration that I didn't have the heart to complain. Evenings when we'd curl up on the couch and he'd help me study, his knowledge of history and literature surprisingly extensive. Nights when he'd hold me and tell me stories about his childhood in Moscow, about his parents' legendary love story, about the family he'd lost, and the empire he'd built from their ashes. I was falling deeper in love with him, and that terrified me almost as much as the violence did. 3 months after the Kozlov massacre, something unexpected happened. I was studying at the kitchen table when Elena rushed in, her face pale. "Miss Richards, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your aunt." My aunt. I hadn't thought about her in years. My mother's sister, who'd cut contact after Mom got sick, who'd refused to help with medical bills or funeral costs, who'd made it clear I was on my own. "I don't want to see her," I said immediately. "She's claiming you're being held against your will," Elena said quietly. "She's threatening to call the police if she doesn't see you." Damien appeared in the doorway, his expression dark. "How did she find this address? I don't know, sir. But she's in the lobby with building security and she's making a scene." I could see the calculation in Damien's eyes, weighing the options, considering the angles, deciding whether this woman was a threat or just a nuisance. "Let her up," I said before he could make the decision for me. "I'll talk to her." "Emma." "She's my family, Damien. The only family I have left. Whatever her reasons for being here, I need to see her." He didn't like it, but he nodded. 5 minutes. And I'm staying in the room. My Aunt Margaret looked older than I remembered. Her clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smudged, and there was something desperate in her eyes that made my stomach turn. "Emma," she breathed when Elena showed her in. "Oh, honey, I've been so worried about you. Really." I kept my voice flat, because the last time we spoke, you told me you couldn't help with Mom's funeral expenses, said you had your own problems to worry about. She flinched. "I know. I know I wasn't there for you when you needed me, but I'm here now. Because I heard..." She glanced at Damien, who stood behind me like a dark shadow. "I heard you were involved with dangerous people. That you might be in trouble. I'm fine. Are you?" She stepped closer. "Because the Emma I knew wouldn't be living in a penthouse with a..." She lowered her voice. "With a criminal. Wouldn't be surrounded by armed guards and..." "The Emma you knew was struggling to survive," I interrupted. "Working herself to death for pennies. Alone. Invisible. Is that really the life you want me to go back to?" "It's better than this." Her voice rose. "Better than being some gangster's pet, locked up in a golden cage. That's enough." Damien's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You've had your 5 minutes. Time to leave." But Margaret wasn't finished. She pulled something from her purse, a phone, screen already showing a news article. "Do you know what he did, Emma? The Kozlov massacre? 23 people dead in one night. And you're living with the monster who ordered it." The words hung in the air. I could feel Damien tense behind me, waiting to see how I'd react. "I know exactly what he did," I said quietly. "And why he did it. Those people tried to kill me, Aunt Margaret. They bombed a warehouse, murdered an innocent man, and came after me because I mattered to Damien. He protected me. He eliminated the threat, and yes, it was brutal and violent and everything you're thinking, but I'm alive because of it. That doesn't make it right, right?" I laughed, and it came out harsh. "You want to talk about right? Where were you when Mom was dying, when I was drowning in medical bills and funeral costs and student loans? Where was your sense of family responsibility then?" I stepped closer to her. "You didn't care about me until you thought you could profit from my situation somehow. So tell me, what do you really want? Money? Is that why you're here?" Her face flushed. "How dare you? How much?" Damien's voice was cold. "How much to make you disappear and never contact Emma again?" Margaret's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I don't..." "Everyone has a price." He pulled out his phone. "Name yours." The desperation in her eyes was answer enough. She wasn't here out of concern. She was here because she'd somehow learned about Damien's wealth and saw an opportunity. 50,000, she whispered. "Just to help me get back on my feet. That's all." Damien laughed. A cold, cruel sound. "You think your niece's peace of mind is worth 50,000? That's insulting." He tapped something on his phone. 100,000. Wired to your account right now. In exchange, you sign papers saying you will never contact Emma again. Never claim any relationship with her. Never speak about her to anyone. Ever. Break this agreement and I'll know, and you don't want to know what happens then. Margaret's hands shook as she stared at the phone. 100,000? Take it or leave it. You have 10 seconds to decide. I'll take it. The words tumbled out. I'll sign whatever you want. Damien gestured to Elena, who'd been standing quietly in the corner. Get the papers. Our legal team has them ready. Of course they did. He'd anticipated this somehow, prepared for it like he prepared for everything. 15 minutes later, Margaret was gone. $100,000 richer and legally prohibited from ever being part of my life again. I stood at the window, watching the street below, feeling strangely empty. I'm sorry. Damien said quietly behind me. For what? Buying off my only living relative? I turned to face him. You probably did me a favor. She was never really family anyway. Not where it counted. Still, you deserved better than that. I deserve you. The words came out before I could stop them. Flawed and violent and possessive as you are, you've been more family to me in these few months than she ever was. You protect me, care for me, see me. That's more than anyone else has done in years. He pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapping around me like he could shield me from everything painful in the world. You'll never be alone again, Emma. I promise you that. I believed him. Because Damien Volkov was many things. Criminal, killer, monster. But he kept his promises, even the dangerous ones. That night, lying in bed with Damien's heartbeat steady under my ear, I realized something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't pretending anymore, wasn't telling myself this was temporary, that I'd eventually find a way back to my old life. That life was gone, burned away by the man who held me like I was his most precious possession. And I was okay with that, more than okay. I was happy. It was a twisted, complicated, morally questionable happiness, but it was real. What are you thinking about? Damien murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. How much I've changed, I admitted. 3 months ago, I would have been horrified by everything about this life. The violence, the control, the way you've taken over every aspect of my existence. But now I can't imagine being anywhere else. With anyone else. I propped myself up to look at him. Does that make me broken? That I've adapted so quickly to something that should terrify me? It makes you a survivor. His hand cupped my face. You've spent your whole life adapting to circumstances beyond your control. This is no different. You're doing what you need to do to survive. Except this time, survival looks like silk sheets and security instead of minimum wage and exhaustion. Is that all this is? Survival? No. His thumb brushed my cheek. This is love. Complicated, messy, probably unhealthy love. But love nonetheless. Probably unhealthy? I laughed. Damien, this is the textbook definition of an unhealthy relationship. And yet you're smiling. I was. Despite everything, despite the blood and the violence and the moral compromises I'd made, I was genuinely happy. I love you, I said. Even though I probably shouldn't, I love you, he replied. Even though I definitely don't deserve you. We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two broken people who'd found something twisted and beautiful in each other's damage. And somewhere in the city below, in the world Damien ruled with blood and fear, his enemies were plotting, his empire was shifting, his future was uncertain. But in that moment, in that bed, with the woman he'd claimed as his own finally accepting her place at his side, he had everything that mattered. 6 months after sitting at the wrong table, I stood in front of a mirror wearing a wedding dress that cost more than my mother's entire medical treatment. The irony wasn't lost on me. The dress was stunning, ivory silk that flowed like water, delicate lace at the shoulders, a train that seemed to go on forever. My hair had been styled by someone who probably charged more per hour than I used to make in a week. Diamonds glittered at my throat and ears, gifts from Damien that came with their own security detail. I looked like a princess, felt like a prisoner playing dress-up. You're beautiful, Miss Richards, Elena said softly, adjusting my veil. Mr. Volkov won't be able to breathe when he sees you. Miss Richards. In a few hours, I'd be Mrs. Volkov. Emma Volkov. The name of a woman who'd chosen to marry a monster because she'd fallen in love with the man underneath. The wedding had been Damien's idea, of course. Sprung on me 2 months ago with the same absolute certainty he brought to everything else in his life. Marry me, he'd said. Not a question. Never a question with him. Why? I'd asked, genuinely curious. We're already living together. I'm already yours in every way that matters. What difference does a piece of paper make? His answer had been simple and devastating. Because I want the world to know you're mine. Because I want legal claim to you in every jurisdiction that recognizes marriage. Because when my enemies look at you, I want them to see not just my woman, but my wife. And because... He'd paused, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Because you deserve to be more than just the woman I keep in my penthouse. You deserve my name, my ring, my vows. You deserve everything, Emma. I'd said yes. Not because I felt I had a choice. Though by then, I'd learned that I did have choices, just different ones than before, but because I wanted it, wanted to be bound to him in every way possible, legal and otherwise, wanted to stop pretending that what we had was temporary or could be walked away from. The ceremony was small, just his inner circle, and a handful of people I'd met through my online classes, who'd become something like friends. No one from my past life. Margaret was long gone, bought off and legally forbidden from contact. My old roommate had moved on, probably grateful to be free of my drama. There was no one left who remembered the old Emma, the girl who'd worked 2 jobs and dreamed of something better. That girl had died in an expensive restaurant 6 months ago, been reborn as someone new, someone harder, someone who could love a killer and sleep peacefully beside him. The venue was one of Damien's properties, a restored mansion outside the city, surrounded by enough security to protect a head of state, because that's what this was, really. Not just a wedding, but a statement, a declaration that Emma Richards had become Emma Volkov, and that anyone who threatened her would face the full weight of his empire. I heard a knock on the door. Victor's voice came through. "It's time, Emma." Elena gave my hand a squeeze before leaving. I stood alone for a moment, staring at my reflection, trying to recognize the woman looking back at me. She was beautiful, polished, expensive, everything the old Emma had never been. But her eyes still held traces of the girl who'd sat at the wrong table and accidentally changed her entire life. Victor was waiting in the hallway, looking uncomfortable in his formal suit. "You look beautiful," he said gruffly. "Damien's a lucky man." "Am I lucky?" I asked quietly. He considered this seriously. "That depends on what you value, Emma. If you wanted a normal life, safe, predictable, boring, then no, you're not lucky. But if you wanted to be loved with the kind of intensity most people only read about in books, if you wanted to matter so much to someone that they'd burn the world for you, then yes, you're the luckiest woman alive. And the violence? The danger? The fact that I might wake up one day to find him dead or arrested or worse? That's the price." He offered me his arm. "Every great love has a price, Emma. Yours just happens to be paid in blood and fear instead of compromise and mediocrity. Only you can decide if that's worth it." I took his arm, and we walked toward the room where Damien was waiting to make me his wife in the eyes of God and law. The ceremony space was decorated with white roses and candles, intimate and romantic, despite the armed guards stationed at every exit. The guests were few but significant, the men and women who ran Damien's empire, who'd kill or die on his command, who were here to witness their leader take a wife. And there, at the front of the room, was Damien. He wore a black suit that looked like it had been designed specifically for him, and probably had been. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his posture commanding, his expression unreadable until his eyes found me. Then everything in his face softened. Wonder, love, possession. All of it naked and raw and so intense I almost stumbled. Victor walked me down the aisle, a strange choice, but there was no one else to do it, and he'd become something like family in these months. When we reached Damien, Victor placed my hand in his and stepped back. "She's yours now," he said quietly. "Officially." "She was always mine," Damien replied, his eyes never leaving my face. The officiant began speaking, some justice Damien had paid or threatened or both, but I barely heard the words. I was too focused on Damien's hands holding mine, on the way he looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. When it came time for vows, he spoke first. "Emma," he said, his voice steady and sure, "6 months ago, you sat at my table by accident, but nothing in my life has ever been an accident. Everything led to that moment, every choice, every mistake, every act of violence that built my empire. It all led to you. And I would do it all again, commit every sin twice over, if it meant ending up here with you." His thumbs brushed over my knuckles. "I can't promise you a normal life. Can't promise you safety or peace or anything resembling conventional happiness, but I can promise you this. I will love you with everything I have until the day I die. I will protect you from everything and everyone who tries to hurt you. I will give you everything you ask for and many things you don't. I will be yours completely, absolutely, without reservation or hesitation. And I will never, ever let you go." The words should have sounded like a threat. Instead, they sounded like salvation. When it was my turn, I took a shaky breath. Damien, you're right. I didn't sit at your table by accident. Some part of me, the part that was tired of being invisible and scared and alone, led me there. Led me to you. And you've given me things I never dared hope for. Not just wealth or security, but purpose. Value. Love so intense it terrifies me. I squeezed his hands. You're dangerous and controlling, and you've made so many choices for me that I've lost count, and I should hate you for it. Should have run screaming 6 months ago. But I didn't. Because underneath all the darkness, I saw someone who understood loneliness the way I did. Who knew what it was like to build walls so high no one could climb them. Who'd convinced himself he didn't need anyone until he met me. Tears burned in my eyes. You're not a good man, Damien Volkov, but you're my man, and I choose you, freely, completely. For better or worse, though I suspect it'll mostly be worse by normal standards, I love you. And I'll stand beside you through whatever comes next. His expression cracked, and for just a moment, I saw the vulnerability he worked so hard to hide, the fear that I'd wake up one day and regret this choice, that I'd realize what I'd given up for him. But I wouldn't. I knew that now with absolute certainty. The officiant pronounced us married. Damien's kiss was claiming and tender at once, a promise and a seal. When we pulled apart, the small crowd applauded, but I barely heard them. All I heard was Damien whispering against my lips, mine. Finally, legally, irrevocably mine. Yours, I agreed, always. The reception was elegant and brief. Damien wasn't one for lengthy celebrations. We ate, we danced, we accepted congratulations from people who probably still weren't sure what to make of me. But eventually, we escaped to the car waiting to take us somewhere. Damien had been secretive about our honeymoon destination, had only told me to pack for warm weather and bring my passport. Where are we going? I asked as the city lights faded behind us. Somewhere no one can find us, he said, pulling me against his side. Somewhere we can pretend the world doesn't exist for a few weeks, just you and me and an island I bought last year specifically for this purpose. You bought an island. I laughed. Of course you did. I wanted somewhere completely secure. Somewhere I could let my guard down and just be with you without worrying about threats or business or anything else. His hand found mine, our wedding rings catching the light. Is that so unreasonable? With you? Nothing is unreasonable. That's part of your charm. We flew to the island on his private jet. Because of course he had a private jet. The flight took hours, but I slept most of the way, my head on Damien's shoulder, exhausted from the emotional weight of the day. When we landed, it was to tropical heat and the sound of waves. The house waiting for us was beautiful. Modern architecture that somehow blended with the natural landscape, floor-to-ceiling windows showing endless ocean, complete privacy from the rest of the world. It's perfect, I breathed. You're perfect, he corrected, carrying me over the threshold like we were in some romantic movie. Everything else is just window dressing. That first night as husband and wife, we made love slowly, reverently, like we were memorizing each other. His hands mapped every inch of my skin. My lips learned every scar on his body. And there were many, each one a story of violence survived. We were gentle with each other in a way we hadn't been before, like marriage had given us permission to be vulnerable, instead of just passionate. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets with moonlight streaming through the windows, Damien said, I need to tell you something. My stomach clenched. Nothing good ever followed those words. Okay. I'm getting out. I propped myself up to look at him. Out of what? The dangerous parts of my business. The parts that put you at risk. His hand traced patterns on my hip. I've been planning it for months, since the Kozlov situation, moving money into legitimate enterprises, distancing myself from the violent operations, building something that won't get you killed. Damien. Let me finish. He sat up, pulling me with him. I can't change who I was, can't erase the blood on my hands or the empire I built on violence. But I can change who I become, for you. For the life we're building together, for the children I hope we'll have someday. Children. The word hung in the air between us. You want children? I asked carefully. I want everything with you, Emma. A real marriage, not just a legal arrangement. A family. A future that's more than just surviving each threat as it comes. His eyes were intense. I want to be better than my father was. Want to give my children a life where they don't have to watch their mother die young from the stress of this world. Where they don't have to become monsters to survive. I thought about what that would mean, raising children in this world, even a sanitized version of it. Teaching them about their father's past, about the violence that had built their privileged life. Wondering if they'd be safe, if Damien's enemies would ever truly let him go. It's risky, I said quietly. Everything about us is risky. He cupped my face. But I think we're worth the risk, don't you? I did. God help me, I did. Then yes, I said. Yes to children and futures and building something real. Yes to all of it. His smile was devastating. Thank you. For what? For seeing past what I am to what I could be. For loving me anyway. For sitting at the wrong table and changing my life completely. I kissed him, pouring everything I felt into it, love and fear and hope and acceptance all tangled together. We spent 2 weeks on that island, and they were the most peaceful weeks of my life. No guards hovering, no business calls interrupting dinners, no violence lurking at the edges, just Damien and me, learning how to be married, how to exist together without the constant threat of danger. He taught me to swim in the ocean. I'd never learned as a child. I taught him to cook simple meals. He'd relied on staff his entire life. We talked about everything and nothing, filling in the gaps in each other's knowledge, building the foundation of something that felt almost normal, almost, because we both knew it couldn't last forever. Eventually, we'd have to return to reality, to the city and his empire and all the complications we'd temporarily escaped. But we had these 2 weeks, and we made them count. On our last night on the island, we sat on the beach watching the sunset, my back against his chest, his arms wrapped around me. Scared? He asked quietly. Terrified, I admitted. Not of going back exactly, but of what comes next, of whether you can really leave that life behind, of whether your enemies will let you. They won't have a choice. His grip tightened. I've spent 6 months quietly transferring power, delegating the dangerous operations to Victor and others I trust. By the time we get back, I'll be mostly legitimate, still wealthy, still powerful, but no longer directly involved in anything that could blow back on you. Mostly legitimate, I smiled despite my fear. That's probably the best I could hope for with you. It is, he agreed without shame. But it's enough. It has to be enough. We flew back to the city the next morning, and I felt the weight of reality settling back on my shoulders as the island disappeared behind us. The real world was waiting, with all its complications and dangers and difficult choices, but I was ready for it. Because I wasn't the girl who'd walked into that restaurant 6 months ago. I was stronger now, harder, more capable of surviving in Damien's world. I was Emma Volkov, and that name meant something. 3 months later, I stood in the bathroom of our penthouse, staring at a pregnancy test with shaking hands. Positive. I'd suspected for a few weeks. The nausea, the exhaustion, the way certain smells made me want to vomit. But seeing it confirmed in plastic and chemicals made it real in a way nothing else could. I was pregnant, carrying Damien's child, about to bring a new life into this complicated, dangerous, beautiful world we'd built together. The door opened. Damien stood there, still in his suit from whatever business meeting he'd just come from, his expression shifting from concern to understanding as he saw what I held. Is that positive? I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm pregnant, Damien. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides, pulled me into his arms, and kissed me like I was the most precious thing in the universe. I love you, he murmured against my hair. I love you so much, Emma. Thank you. Thank you for this, for staying, for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Are you happy? I asked, needing to hear it. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at me, and his eyes were wet. You've given me a future, Emma, a reason to be better than I was, a family to build and protect and love. You've given me everything. And looking at him, this dangerous, violent, impossibly loving man, I realized I felt the same way. I'd sat at the wrong table 6 months ago. Met a man I shouldn't have met, made choices I shouldn't have made, accepted a life I shouldn't have accepted. But somehow, impossibly, I'd ended up exactly where I belonged, in the arms of a monster who loved me like I was his salvation. Carrying his child, building a future that was complicated and dangerous, and absolutely perfectly mine. I love you, I said. Even though you're controlling and possessive and you probably kidnapped me. Definitely kidnapped you, he agreed with a smile. Best decision I ever made. Worst decision I ever made, I countered. But also the best. He kissed me again, one hand moving to rest on my still flat stomach where our child grew. We're going to be good at this. The family thing. The normal thing. We're never going to be normal, Damien. No, he agreed, but we'll be us. And that's better. Epilogue. 2 years later, I stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching Damien rock our daughter to sleep. Anastasia, named after his mother, had his dark hair and my eyes, and she'd wrapped him completely around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. She's asleep, I said softly. He looked up, his expression so tender it made my heart ache. 5 more minutes, I smiled, leaning against the doorframe. This was my life now. Not perfect, not normal, but mine. Damien had kept his promise, moved away from the violent parts of his empire, built something safer for our family. There were still guards, still security measures, still traces of the world he'd come from. But the immediate danger had faded. He'd become the man he'd promised he would be. Not a saint. He'd never be that, but a father who loved fiercely, a husband who protected completely, a man who'd chosen family over empire. And I'd become someone I never imagined I could be. Strong enough to survive in his world, brave enough to build a life in it, wise enough to know that love didn't have to be perfect to be real. Finally, Damien laid Anastasia in her crib, kissed her forehead, and came to me. His arms wrapped around me from behind as we both watched our daughter sleep. Any regrets? He asked quietly. About sitting at the wrong table? About staying when I should have run? About marrying you and having your child and building this insane life together? I turned in his arms to look at him. Not a single one. Good. He kissed me softly. Because you're stuck with me forever, Emma Volkov. I know, I said. That's exactly what I'm counting on. We stood there in the doorway, watching our daughter sleep, and I thought about the girl I'd been 2 years ago. Tired, scared, invisible, working herself to death for scraps. She'd walked into a restaurant and sat at the wrong table, and found everything she'd never known she wanted.